Welcome to The Green Fix. In this podcast, we explore how businesses are navigating a changing world through the lens of supply chains, sustainability, and tech.
Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today and pay our respects to elders past and present. Today we are joined by Darren Umbers, the Managing Director of Performance Health in Australia and New Zealand, and also the company's Global Head of Sustainability and ESG. We wanted Darren to join us due to his multi-market healthcare experience across clinical, B2B and consumer channels in an industry that has a significant transformation roadmap ahead of it as supply chain disruptions, stakeholder expectations and climate risks continue to evolve. Darren, welcome to The Green Fix.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me.
One thing that we'd love to understand from each of our guests is how your background specifically created the entry point for you coming into the world of ESG and now holding what I'm sure you're aware of is a pretty unique position within a global organization.
It's a twisty road. If I look back, I suppose I still am, but I graduated as a scientist, followed my love of human biology and became a biomedical scientist, and then almost immediately cast off the white coat as I graduated. For whatever reason, the commercial side of the equation seemed to be more attractive to me at the age of 21. And I really followed that healthcare route for many, many years. And I hate to say, but I don't think I was particularly conscious about my impact on the planet until, I suppose, the COVID times. COVID gave us space. I looked at the voice that I had with my team, and I think I just became aware that I could influence what other people thought, and therefore I'm not making the most of that. And keeping that under wraps was not the right way to play. So I became more conscious about what I could do myself, first of all, and then developed a little bit more confidence to start talking to others about in amongst the hypocrisy of having not done so for many years, what gave me the right. But yeah, I kind of got back in touch with my roots, I think, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, it's a journey that I think all of us have been on. And particularly in the industry that you're in, it's fantastic to see the work that you're doing. I know Performance Health has a catalogue of over 30,000 products. Can you explain to our listener what the company does, what the offering is, and how you help your customers?
It's a very broad catalogue, but at the same time focused in on fundamentally what we would call assistive technology. So medical aids, sometimes really, really simple. Like it could be as simple as a long-handled sponge holder for somebody who can't physically bend and reach to clean below their knees. We call that technology, but it's just practical application of something that helps somebody live a better life. Weaved into those products, we've got some very complicated post-stroke recovery products or limb retraining items. Everything in our portfolio helps somebody gain the best physical function facing them with whatever disability or challenge they have, whether that's a sporting injury or just simply life and aging or a disability, everything from wheelchairs to, as I said, complex stroke rehabilitation.
Why is ESG, sustainability, climate, nature, why is that important to the organization from a commercial perspective?
There is a rich theme of integrity that runs through Performance Health. Every organization needs to sustain themselves and make a profit to do so. But there is a genuine thread that winds through all of the 1,200 employees that work globally for Performance Health, more so than I've seen in other companies. We are far from perfect, but everybody wants to improve the state of play and try and leave the planet in a better place. Some more capable than others to be able to work out how to do that. There is this desire to give back and do the best we can. But from a perspective of where we stand, we're also very honest about the fact that we've got a long way to go.
We were fortunate to be introduced by the wonderful Danny Matthews at Abundium. And through our conversation with her, it really became obvious that there is this emerging trend of leaders in Australian subsidiaries of multinationals who are being asked to lead their respective companies' ESG mandates. What are the advantages and challenges that you have found driving a multinational sustainability strategy from the APAC region?
I think it gives the organization an ability to test in an environment that is not dissimilar to the developed economies in Northern Europe and North America, and learn before you try and accelerate. If things don't work, you can adjust and deploy something that will. And I'm not sure that's how this naturally evolved on this occasion, but very often that's the intent. Let's try something. Let's see if we can make it work. In Australia, it's a representative market. This one came about mainly because of my desire to experiment. I felt like I needed to step up and do the best I could with my local team, and it captured the attention of our global players. We're only about 5 or 6% of the global organization down here, if you look at it from financial lenses. So we're a very small piece of influence, but we got the attention because we decided to just change the things that we could change without needing to interface with complex global projects. And at that point, we kind of proved the concept down here. So we were seen as the center of excellence, which is probably a little too grandiose for what we actually were. We were probably the team that was trying as hard as it could and making mistakes along the journey, but having some success. And that then put us into the seat to be able to share our experience. The difficulty is the tyranny of distance and the time zone. And I think lastly, the challenge of focusing on this from here at the moment is obviously the current focus to deprioritize ESG in our most abundant market, which is the US. We're a US headquartered organization. Our company has lost none of the passion for ESG, but a lot of the people around my colleagues in the US are deprioritizing the topic. That's a challenge to still be in a part of the world where that hasn't changed, and to be able to justify resource and effort in a part of the world where it has.
It's a fascinating combination of commercial pressures in some part of the world, political pressures in other parts of the world, and just trying to thread that needle. As you mentioned, there have been shifting priorities, particularly in the Americas. Obviously, resources are being diverted all around the world at the moment. You know, the war in Iran, the tariffs coming out of the US. How do you keep the global board focused on long-term climate targets without sounding like you're not necessarily listening or aware of the immediate pressures?
I think that last sentence there is critical. It's not being evangelical about the cause with the lack of awareness for what's impacting people today. This isn't a choice between commercial success and climate commitments. We know that the two support each other, and it is the same conversation. I think that truth gets lost in moments like this, where short-term concern and short-termism become really the main focus. And I have to be pragmatic about how many steps backwards I'm prepared to take, or how many positions I need to hold until we get ourselves into that place where we can move forward more confidently. It's an analogy. I drive surf rescue boats, and you look at the waves that are coming at you, and some waves you can power through or consciously tip over, and some you need to turn and back up and work your route again. And I think this is one of those moments. It's don't blow your credibility. Don't blow the efforts of your team. Be conscious about saying standing still is not a negative thing in this situation.
It's a really good analogy. For some companies, this is actually the break in the waves that will solidify their sustainability strategy. You know, whether they've been able to electrify their fleet, whether they've been already sourcing renewable energy, there will be opportunities there. But for other organizations, it's almost the last thing in the world that the board and the executive team want to be talking about right now.
Every cloud has a silver lining. It is true in the current environment as well. And I would suspect that the political risk of being reliant upon imported fossil fuels has never been more conscious in the minds of not just governments, but individuals like you and I. I mean, you just got to look at the queues at the petrol pumps. How many people are saying, never again? I don't want to be held to ransom like this. So there is some positive that we can drive through this with the greatest of respect, of course, for those whose lives are being upended or ended by the tragic events that are going on globally.
I couldn't agree more. The supply chains in particular, they're stepping out of the scope 3 shadow and really coming into the light in terms of how companies are positioned, where the opportunities are due to having resilient supply chains, and where there's some weak links that maybe they weren't aware of. How does Performance Health think of not only scope 3 up the chain, but also down the chain from a data challenge perspective?
I think that's everybody's greatest challenge. And it certainly is ours. We start from a base of very little, and we need to learn, and we manufacture many of our products in our own factories, but we also work with third-party manufacturers. So we have a vast network across Asia Pacific in particular. We pragmatically begun by starting with an 80-20 segmentation. We actually began the whole exercise in 2022 by doing a materiality survey of our suppliers, our customers, our team members, to try and work out what's most important to them, because we can't be expert in everything immediately. We just don't have the ability to accelerate that fast. So we began to focus on the biggest priorities as expressed through that materiality survey. And then we realized that spend data and then using the right assumptions from spend data was certainly better than nothing. And let's begin there. And that's how we computed our baseline year and planned to reach out and try and dig deeper into the material composition and get better connectivity with our suppliers. And that mission it's going to take us many years to get to a place where we say it's about as accurate as we can get it. But we began and we took a credible step forward.
I'm fascinated by the supply chain engagement. We often see the first time a supplier is asked for this information from a company, it's almost like, I will just let that one go through to the keeper. It's the first time we've heard about it. We don't know what you're talking about. We don't understand the words. And then all of a sudden it starts, well, actually now we have 5 customers asking for the same data. Then we have 10. So then there's the business case to actually start investigating it. But how do you go about negotiating that data collection process with suppliers who may be hesitant to begin with, or may be under-resourced themselves when it comes to being able to pull together the information that you're asking for?
I think in the simplest sense, it's meet them where they are, not where you wish they were. And I think we learned the hard way, because we issued a supplier survey, which was kind of a code of conduct document that was 25 pages long. You could already see the error in that as I say those words. In retrospect, it was great. It was well presented. It was beautiful reading, but it just daunted our suppliers and they didn't know where to begin. And we got close to 0% response rate from our supplier base. So we regrouped and we went again with a 1-page approach. And that was a great learning curve. Failure spawns the best learnings. And we deployed a 1-page survey and questionnaire and sign up feature to say, do you agree that these are the principles that we are mutually progressing? And we achieved a 100% sign up in Asia Pacific. So from 0 to 100%. And that's just the beginning. So meet them where they are, make it simple, make it achievable and not daunting. And I think ultimately try and provide the easiest possible way to share information, which is where we haven't fully realized this benefit for suppliers yet, but we invested in a carbon management software system, which gives us the ability to manage the interface between suppliers in a low touch way. And that's part of our forward direction. We've used it to date to quantify more of our scope 1, scope 2, and the emissions factor scope 3 information based on spend. But in the future, we will use that to help our suppliers and help us as well.
Have you been able to use that data with your other stakeholders?
We're a private equity owned business. Madison Dearborn own Performance Health, and the group, Madison Dearborn Group, produces a lot of investor focused data on all of their group companies. And previously to these initiatives, we had more significant gaps in the data we could share with them. We were quite strong with our HR and people and social focused data, but really we were not strong with our climate footprint data. We're now able to meaningfully contribute to that communication with those partners. And that's a step forwards. But I think the other place that it really gets credibility is in the UK. The National Health Service is one of the world's top 3 employers in terms of numbers of people employed. And when you bid for products to be included in the NHS supply chain, you have to quantify the efforts that you're making in this space, not just have an aspiration statement, but have some solid measurement and some carbon reduction plans that you can substantiate. So this data actually is essential to trade in the UK. And it's becoming more so in Australia, as we see with state-based contracts with healthcare providers, private and public. Everybody wants to be able to measure and map and track the journey. Rightfully so. This is a point I make regularly. We, as a small subsidiary in Australia, don't actually slot into phase 3 of the carbon reporting legislation here, but our customers do. And they need this information.
Yeah. And going back to where the world is at the moment, the more proactive suppliers can be to their customers, the more favorably they're going to be looked upon.
I couldn't agree more. Somebody said once on a sustainability course I was on with UTS that sustainability is strategy, and it's not a separate department. It shouldn't be. It's everything about ensuring the long-standing relationship you have with your customer base. And if you get that right, you're on the front foot and you're helping them.
Yeah. And to use the reporting parlance, are you going to bring opportunities to your customers, or are you going to be a risk in their supply chain because you don't have visibility over your operations, so they don't have visibility over how their operations can be disrupted by you? And I think that's just going to play out more and more over the next 2 or 3 years as all of these reports start coming out.
I agree, Dan. And one's a fun place to be. The other is not as fun. It's fun to be innovating and collaborating and partnering, and you need a degree of information to be able to do that well, but you don't have to be perfect.
Yes, and I think that is key. The unwillingness of some companies to try to innovate because they're worried they're not going to get it right from the beginning. But no one runs a business that way in any other respect. And then we come to sustainability and it's like, oh, we don't want to say anything or do anything until it's perfect.
Absolutely. We got a live example today. I spent the morning talking about some of our thermoplastic products that get used to splint a limb injury. They're made from plastics, and we've taken a solid step forward in knowing how biodegradable our product is. It's not biodegradable enough. We shouldn't play the game of which is the best standard that gives us the best claim. We should be playing the game of what can we do in the short, medium, and long term to make this product still function the way the clinical users and the end users need it to, but actually have less of a footprint and less of an impact at end of life. And it's really engaging to see our global team come together and say, we're not going to make marketing claims. We're actually going to work towards a better outcome.
Yeah. It's really cool. And also I love that because the focus has to be first and foremost on the function.
There are trade-offs that people are prepared to make. I mean, I hear from clinical stakeholders, if I take crutches, for example, we had a situation where we would deliver a box of 10 crutches. They were within a cardboard outer, and each individual crutch, so 20, wrapped in a plastic sleeve. That was configured many years ago. It was seen as the best way to get the product scratch-free across the water. And it was really heartening to hear the clinical stakeholders say, we don't care if there are a few scratches on our new crutches. We'd rather the plastic not be in there. And that's a good example where compromise can be made. And then there are times when it can't be. We were talking about recycled thermoplastic materials. And the danger with that is you've got to get the medical device registration and you don't know the origin of those materials. And that becomes a very hard space to operate. So find the places where you can compromise because they exist.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk a little bit about the internal team, but I wonder what specific mechanisms or methods or spaces do you like to create that actually work in drawing out what we refer to as hidden internal advocates who care about sustainability within organizations.
It's magical when you see it. It's like somebody turning on a lighthouse and you see this beam of light coming from a corner that you didn't expect to see it from. And I think the main point is you should expect to see it. It's in it's in many of our team members. If you give them the oxygen and the support and the safe space where their enthusiasm can be rewarded and not ridiculed. So ditch the job titles, give people the ability to express their thoughts and ideas. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really, really proud about with the sustainability program that we're building here, is that we've created this climate champions network of people who self-volunteer and who self-regulate and come back with ideas. Can we, could we, should we? Great ideas. Some of them are very easy to execute and actually are not cost negative. They're immediate wins commercially as well as sustainably, which is the same thing.
Yeah. But for those in leadership positions, your peers, fellow executives, how would you recommend they go about building these kind of environments if they haven't traditionally operated in this manner?
I think getting the head beyond the next 3 years is particularly important since the recent activities we've seen. I don't think the direction that we've seen in the last few months globally and politically dictates the direction that we'll continue to take as a community. That's very important. The short-termism isn't going to get us where the rest of the world wants us to be. The second piece is that ESG is not a little team and department that sits in the back of your head office working away. It's actually in the heart of your strategy team and your HR team and your sales team and every team, engineering, product development. It's every team. So you can switch on the engagement or you can switch off the engagement of your people in every department and your customers, of course, by the stance that you take on this most important issue. If you're fortunate enough to ever collect a child who comes out of a daycare or preschool or a primary school in this country, those little guys and girls come out talking about the earth and the planet in a way that I wish we were educated. So if you have any doubt as to how your new intake of employees are thinking, they're not thinking like we were trained to think. They want to see a conscious approach, and our customers want to see a conscious approach. And ESG is strategy, and it is the right thing for the planet. And if we're not doing anything about it, we're probably driving our businesses towards a dead end that we're going to have to reverse out of. And that's going to cost more money, and you will have lost a lot of ground along the way.
If that is the case, you've already alluded to the fact 2050 is a long way away. 23 years and 9 months away. How do you help a large organization like Performance Health manage the daily momentum, but then also not fall into analysis paralysis?
You can get lost in the regulatory side of the conversation. And as much as that regulatory side is driving action and driving positive forward movement, it shouldn't just drive the box ticking kind of positive forward movement, because then what gets lost is that great idea, that step forward, that let's stop doing this and start doing that kind of thinking, because you've given it to an audit team, not a creative team who's capable of auditing. So I think that's one piece. I think the other piece is that constant reminder. 2050 is the ultimate destination. I wish it could be brought forward with a more invest-focused timeline, then that might be possible. But right now, the only thing that matters is what we do this year. And what we fail to do this year means we've got more to do next year. So 4% reduction in carbon footprint year on year is the trajectory that we're aiming at. What business has a 25-year business plan? I'm sure some do, but they're in the minority. We have a 25-year net zero plan, and we've really just got to make this year count every year.
It made me think there are some businesses who will try to do their homework the night before. And I don't think that this is a high school paper that you need to write. There's such key structural changes that have to be put in place over many, many years.
Absolutely. The milestones are critical. Without the milestones, it is the night before the exam. And we make mistakes. We learn and we backtrack and move forward again. But you've got to know where your milestones are. And then those big rocks as well. And we're at a point right now where we're trying to increase resource and increased resource in an American headquartered organization right now in this area. That's a tough conversation, but we know that that's the conversation that we need to have with ourselves.
Speaking of operating within a global organization, the global ESG rinned with the managing director role of ANZ. I don't know how many MDs of ANZ are going to also become global ESG leaders, but they're all going to have to incorporate it into their role in some form or another. How do you ensure that this work continues to be rewarding for you rather than, kind of weight of the world on your shoulders?
Yes, that is critical. I think it's energy and personal energy and sustaining it and knowing how to sustain the energy of your team and not burn them out in that quest for better. We won't get there if we burn our team. And I think we've got to protect their psychological energy at the same time. Some of that can be done well with education and networking. Some of that can be done well with tools. And I know hypocritical to say AI because AI has a footprint in its own right, data centers and power. But if you want to accelerate learning and capability in a team with finite resources, your ESG AI assistant is your best friend. And you can maintain or even accelerate momentum. So being honest about what can be achieved, though, there is no point burning your team on the way to an objective that nobody feels like celebrating when you achieve it.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into the rapid fire, what is one thing that you would like our listener to take away from the conversation today?
I didn't feel qualified to talk in public about ESG at all. I was aware, I became conscious that I wasn't doing enough. And I think I felt like I had to maybe traditionally the career trajectory before you could stand up on a lectern and start talking about a topic was 10, 15 years. I don't think that's the case in this space. Nobody's perfect. Every expert has a learning need and a gap. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to want to try. And that for me gave me the confidence, along with my global colleagues, thinking that we had something in terms of the early achievements we'd made to say, I'm not frightened to fail. I'm not going to be embarrassed by the fact that I haven't done anything for 25 years or I haven't done much. I'm just going to take one small learning at a time. Deodorant, lights, packaging, food sources, superannuation, car, they can all come down the line and let's start the learning. Let's get people involved. It really boosted the team's engagement to be given a voice here.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Darren. Alrighty, rapid fire. What is one recommended form of media that you would like to share with our listeners?
One recommended form of media. I love learning, and I think you've mentioned Abundium. Abundium as a group for globally owned multinationals that don't have a headquarter in Australia has been a great way for me to network with people who are doing similar things to me, who also feel imperfect in their approach, but want to learn. And I think that connection got me through to UTS and the micro credential on sustainability. And I think it's an old-fashioned version of networking. It's less media focused, but that gives you the baseline to feel confident to ask the questions that you might have felt were too silly. Talking to like-minded people who are having like-minded challenges, being on these webinars, being on these discussion group forums, and then you get the right recommendations for the right podcasts, for the right people to listen to when you're in your car. Green fix whilst you're going to work in the morning. The diversity of input. You need to jump out of your swim lane. If you're in healthcare, you can't just talk to healthcare professionals or listen to the challenges of healthcare professionals. You've got to listen to retail, engineering. You've got to take inspiration from someone who runs an airline and hear about how they're approaching sustainability. So massively diverse sources of interesting information that feeds the brain.
Absolutely. Who is someone who's inspired you on your journey that you think we should have on the podcast?
You may have come across them already, but Nick Robinson and his son Harry Robinson formed a sunglasses company called Good Citizens. But I have a pair right here. They're the best glasses that I have ever worn. Sunglasses with prescription lenses. They're made from a 1 litre plastic bottle collected from the beaches. They're put together in a thermoplastics factory in Warriewood, so just down the road, and they use the resources of a family business and local people in the community to produce a product that ended up having 3 months in Selfridge's window on Oxford Street in London next to the Prada display. Now, they are not as highfalutin and the marketing budget is not as deep as Prada. Please don't get me wrong, but these guys are so inspirational. They inspire me in terms of the number of times they've tried and failed and kept going. And there's a beautiful little podcast that they did on TEDx recently where Harry and Nick stand up on stage and post this idea about the idea that you have in the shower. Most people have an idea in the shower, and by the time they've got out, it's washed down the drain. They don't do anything about it. These kinds of thinkers, they have the idea and they're not frightened to give it a go and fail and fail and fail. Good Citizens is the name of the company, and I've been inspired by them many times.
Fantastic. Very good. What a story. Can you share a piece of positive climate news that you've heard recently?
I would love to be cheeky and share 3 because I am a glass half full kind of person. And it in part goes back to your question about inspirational sources of information. Like if all we do is dial in to those less curated information sources, people are trying to sell us bad news, and it can be a little bit depressing to read day to day. I plugged into a podcast which was called Future Crunch when it first came out, but Fix the News is their current go-to-market, where they present the news that nobody else is presenting to you. And the world looks very, very different. There is so much going on. It would be hard to give you one thing. The first thing that struck me listening last week to Future Crunch, Fix the News, was that the UK has got the lowest carbon footprint it has had in the last 150 years. A lower carbon footprint now with 70 million people. The population in 1880, I'm going to guess, was sub 30, probably sub 25 million. So that's massive. That little country, but big achievement. The second piece of made me feel great news was that last year, 2025, renewables produced more power than coal globally for the first time ever. That's news you don't necessarily hear about when you hear about some of the rollbacks that are going on in the US. And the closure of coal plants is still continuing because it's been set in motion and can't be stopped. And yeah, I think the last piece I've already probably flagged to you is that I think the only good piece of news that may well come out of the tragic circumstances in the Middle East at the moment is that it could well be the death blow for fossil fuels powering industry and powering transport. I think if you look at the data points and you go back to the last 2 times when major shifts occurred in people's public perceptions of attitudes around fuel, 1973, I think it was the Yom Kippur War. There was a significant change in government policy that occurred after that event. And then there was another significant shift when Russia engaged with the Ukraine, and that shocked the energy supply. People realized that change needed to happen. And now, of course, we're here with the current conflict. And I think there's a light shining brightly on the future because of this very sad situation. And I think we've got to take the good from the bad and water the green shoots.
Yeah. When the world doesn't map necessarily to the way that we expect it to, and we need to figure out solutions. That is human nature in a nutshell. Yeah. So you now get to use the Green Fix magic wand. What is one thing, Darren, that you would like to change in the world?
I would love to wave your wand and stop that piece of human nature that makes us tribal and that works against sharing and collaborating. Now, I know there are some beautiful stories of sharing and collaborating and not being tribal and being a global citizen. But I would love to wave that wand in all the areas where the wrong behaviors seem to prevail, where maybe greed comes before thinking about others, where the short term wins over the medium and long term. Let's wave the wand in that direction so that we can take the best of the best and stop setting ourselves back as a race.
Yeah, perfect. Great use. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think not only the industry that you work in, the leadership that you show, but also clearly your fascination with constantly learning is such a key skill set for leaders to have in today's world. And I think as that leadership class starts to regenerate a little bit, as once termed future leaders become current leaders, I really hope that they can replicate your approach.
Thank you, Dan. It's great to talk with you, and it's part of my learning. Every conversation is. I will never stop learning, and I'm also very happy to change my mind on topics because you have to be. You can't stay in a rigid position if you're a genuine learner. So yeah, I really appreciate the connection with you, and I will keep listening to Green Fix to accelerate my learning. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, mate.
This was Green Fix with your hosts, Loretta Gutierrez and Dan Levington. You can get your Green Fix every 2 weeks on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Pocket Casts.